Remembered for his bloody purges that resulted in the deaths and executions of hundreds of thousands, Joseph Stalin was the leader of the Soviet Union from 1924 until his death in 1953. During his time as a dictator, he oversaw the victory over Nazism during the Second World War, and after initially signing a treaty with Hitler, things turned sour between the Germans and the Soviets. As Hitler sought to expand his empire, he would look east and launch Operation Barbarossa. But during fighting on the Eastern Front, there was a very close relative of Adolf Hitler who was captured, and also a very close relative of Stalin that fell into enemy hands. There was a deal to swap the pair, however Stalin ultimately rejected it, and with this signed his own son's death warrant. Join us today as we look at how Stalin sentenced his own son to death, and remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Yakov Dzhugashvili was the son of Joseph Stalin, and home life was not good for the young boy. Shortly after his birth, his father was involved in a bank robbery, and they then left to avoid capture. Yakov's mother died in December 1907, leaving him in the hands of his father, but then Stalin abandoned his son to be raised by his wife's family, and he was a very distant father. He spent 14 years being raised by his aunts, before he was then sent to Moscow to live with his dad. He did not understand Russian, and his father refused to allow him to adopt the surname Stalin. Yakov, despite this, was known for being kind, and began to train as an engineer. But in 1937, he was pushed into training in the artillery academy. Things were not good between father and son, as Stalin rejected Yakov's idea to marry a daughter of a priest. Yakov, even in the fallout, tried to take his own life by shooting himself, and was very fortunate that he did not die. He did get married, but as the Second World War broke out, the war would eventually come to the Soviet Union's doorstep. Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, and the German tanks and blitzkrieg flew into Soviet lands. At first, the Germans made significant advancements, and Stalin could not believe what had happened. More men were pushed into the Red Army to help defend the Union against the Wehrmacht's advances, and there was a huge amount of slaughter in lands as the Einsatzgruppen carried out scores of massacres. The Nazis hated the communists, and Hitler sought it as his plan to smash the ideology. Yakov Dzhugashvili, Stalin's son, remained inside of the artillery division of the 14th Howitzer Regiment of the 14th Tank Division, and he was then deployed into action. However, things went very badly for him, and it was not long before he was captured and taken as a prisoner of war. Within 1 month of the Nazis invading the Soviet Union, during the Battle of Smolensk, Yakov was seized by the enemy. The German forces outnumbered his group, and they surrounded the artillery battery where he was, and despite the order being given to retreat, Yakov disobeyed. He claimed to try and rally the soldiers and said, "I am the son of Stalin, and I do not allow the battery to retreat." There were allegations that his specific fighting group were betrayed by other members of the Red Army, who dissented against Stalin and had turned against him, but some believe that he surrendered to the Germans of his own will. However, capturing Stalin's son was seen as a huge coup for the Germans, and it was printed in newspapers to show the capture of someone regarded as highly significant. They did not initially know the relationship between Yakov Dzhugashvili and his father, and that there was hardly one there, with the two not seeing eye to eye. Stalin could even be seen as resenting his son at times, but he would be furious with his capture. The leader of the Soviet Union had ordered a no-surrender order and a no-retreat order, saying that every man and woman of the Red Army was to fight to the death and not take a step back. With the fact his son had surrendered to the enemy, he saw this as the ultimate betrayal, and with this practically disowned his son. He wished that his son had killed himself instead of becoming a prisoner of war, and this put Stalin in a position of having to make a decision as to try and save him. But he would not do this. The Germans confirmed his identity, and images were shown in newspapers of him smiling with enemy soldiers, almost as if he was a celebrity. A leaflet that was dropped over the Soviet soldiers said that Yakov wrote, "Dear father, I have been taken prisoner. I am in good health. I will be soon sent to a camp for officers in Germany. I am being treated well. I wish you good health." Yakov Dzhugashvili was awarded the Order of the Red Banner by the Red Army, but then Stalin's son was taken into the Nazi Third Reich and was transported to Berlin. Goebbels, the head of propaganda, was wanting him to make a demoralising radio broadcast, but this never materialised, and he was then sent to Sachsenhausen Concentration Camp. This camp was where 200,000 prisoners would pass through the barbed wire fences, and thousands would be killed there by the conditions and the gas chambers. Inside the camp, the prisoners were forced to work very hard and were given hardly any food, and executions took place all around inside the camp. Whilst Yakov was there, he was seen as a star prisoner, but he was far from this. He was argumentative and often fought with British prisoners, but he would never make it out of Sachsenhausen alive. His death sentence was virtually signed by his own father, who rejected a number of prison swaps for him. First of all, offered in exchange for Stalin's son was Heinz Hitler. Heinz was the nephew of Hitler and was his favourite. The Führer had big plans for Heinz, who had been captured fighting on the Eastern Front. He aspired to be an officer, but on the 10th of January 1942 was captured after trying to retrieve radio equipment. He was then captured by the Soviets, but then an offer was made by Hitler to Stalin. Hitler clearly valued his nephew more than Stalin valued his son, and he offered to swap Yakov for Heinz Hitler through the Swedish Red Cross to guarantee safety. However, Stalin was still furious with his son's surrender, and he rejected this offer. With this, it hammered the first nail in his son's coffin, and Heinz Hitler was later tortured to death inside of a Moscow prison. Following the Battle of Stalingrad, German General Paulus was seized, and Hitler and the Germans wanted him back. An offer was even made to swap Paulus with Stalin's son. However, Yakov himself would admit that he would not like to be swapped for a field marshal. In terms of value for Paulus for Dzhugashvili, militarily there was no question to it, and it would have been a bad move by the Soviets to accept it. Stalin was furious with the proposal and said, just how many sons ended up in camps? Who would swap them for Paulus? Were they worse than Yakov? Stalin then rejected this offer, and there was allegedly one more proposal made. Hitler approached Stalin again, according to a historian, with a proposal to swap Yakov for Hitler's nephew, Leo Raubal. Raubal was injured in the Battle of Stalingrad, and Paulus himself asked for a plane to evacuate him, but this was refused, and he then fell into Soviet hands. Stalin would yet again refuse this third prison swap, and with this, virtually sentenced his own son to death. Yakov inside of Sachsenhausen was of no worth anymore, and it was looking likely that he would be executed or killed, as he was also causing a significant degree of trouble. But the fact his father refused to get him to safety shows how little Stalin valued his life, and also how he resented the fact that he had surrendered. This drove Stalin incredibly mad, but Yakov Dzhugashvili would die inside of the concentration camp. His father wanted nothing to do with him, and there are different accounts as to how he died. One account states that he ran into an electric fence after arguing with British prisoners, and another states that he possibly accidentally did this. But a German officer after then went up to his lifeless body and then shot him 4 times to make sure that Stalin's son was dead. Joseph Stalin ultimately sentenced his own son to death, with the fact he was so gutted by his son's surrender. The anger he had for this caused him to be stuck inside of Sachsenhausen, and after finding out about his death, it was said Stalin regretted deeply his actions. If he had been more caring at any point towards his son, then chances are their relationship would have been more positive, and he would have seen it as necessary to swap him. A fair deal for Yakov Dzhugashvili would have been swapping him for one of Hitler's nephews, who had similar ranks in the military as him. But ultimately it was Stalin's rejection that led to the death of his son. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.